Hello and welcome to our special show on Prime Minister Modi's state visit to the United States. His first state visit. Remember, he will only be the third leader to be hosted for a state visit at the White House by President Biden. This visit is being touted as one which will be unprecedented, historic, high on celebration, but also hard work and deliverables as well. Let me give you a sense of what to expect tomorrow onwards when the Prime Minister lands in New York. This is going to be a 3-day visit where there will be a number of discussions on AI, on semiconductors, on trade, defense and geopolitical ties as well. Yes, the Prime Minister lands in New York on the 20th of June. He will be meeting leading U.S. CEOs, and these will be people and representatives of companies like Micron, GE and General Atomics as well. Soon after that, he will be leaving for the Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. will be an important event for the Prime Minister, but before that, he will be leading International Yoga Day celebrations at the UN headquarters. In Washington, D.C., the Prime Minister will participate in skilling and capacity building event. He will also be engaging in a private meeting with President Biden. Let's tell you more about the event. There will also be a formal bilateral meeting that will happen on the 22nd. This will be between Prime Minister Modi and President Biden. He will receive a ceremonial welcome at the White House. There will be several bilateral discussions and delegation-level talks between the two leaders on a range of subjects. They will spend an unprecedented amount of time together. The Prime Minister on 22nd will also be addressing the U.S. Congress, the only leader to have addressed the U.S. Congress twice. There is also a state dinner that is hosted for him by President Biden and the First Lady Jill Biden. And following that, on the 23rd, we will see Kamala Harris, the U.S. Vice President, Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State, hosting a lunch at the U.S. State Department for the Prime Minister. And the Prime Minister will also be meeting more CEOs, professionals from the U.S. industry. There will be a meeting that will take place at Kennedy Center in the evening. And following that, there will be a diaspora event. You've seen the Prime Minister addressing community events wherever he goes. So he will be addressing a diaspora event at the Reagan Center. In terms of deliverables, India-US will announce a roadmap for defense industrial ties, linking supply chains as well. It will be called the Defense Industrial Roadmap. Well, this is the big deal everyone is talking about, the GE and HAL deal. This could include up to 80% tech transfer to HAL. This jet engine will be used to power our Tejas Mark II aircraft in the future. Defense purchases, yes, India is likely to buy Reaper drones from General Atomics. These could be worth $3 billion. So the whole focus will be pivoting towards the United States as far as manufacturing goes, and the GE, General Electric Company, will be transferring jet engine technology to us over a 3-year period in phases, and 600 Indian MSMEs could benefit from this deal as well. Let's look at critical and emerging technology, which will be very important during this visit as well. India and US to announce a collaboration on skilling and training. Micron may announce an investment of up to $1 billion. This could be more also, as per some reports. So we will keep an eye out for what happens in the semiconductor space. But remember, the US NSA had said that this will be a very important aspect of this visit. At the same time, there will be discussions on AI, quantum computing, deploying 5G, 6G, education, trade as well. So let's see what happens over the next few days. I caught up with Ambassador Taranjit Sandhu last week and began by asking him about the key priorities of the Prime Minister's visit to the US.
The most important priority is essentially it is oriented towards the development of the people. And I will explain to you how that gets connected with the different, broadly 5 areas. First, healthcare. And you know the importance of healthcare, especially after the COVID. There's been a lot of focus. But you are aware that affordable vaccines, affordable medicines is an important priority both in the United States and in India. I don't know how much you may know, but almost 50% of medicines in the United States are actually manufactured and supplied by Indian producers. For example, paracetamol, if you go to any of the, let's say, CVS or the local pharmacies, even if you look behind, it will be made in India. And that plays a significant role in lowering the medicine prices. Similarly, when India is exporting them, there is a lot of employment generation and also a lot of foreign exchange generation. Similarly, if we look at affordable vaccines, now I'll give you one example. There was a vaccine called rotavirus. This was being manufactured in the United States and it almost costed $60. When the co-production started with an Indian company and the bulk production was done in India, the cost of one vaccine from $60 came down to $1. And together, we were able to export it to Africa, Latin America, CARICOM, Indo-Pacific. So you can see how this simple thing like healthcare can impact. Similarly, digital technology, and in technology, we have the startups, we have the innovation, which is very, very significant for India's young population. And also critical technology on which I'm sure in subsequent questions we'll be able to touch upon. Now, technology cuts across. It touches every area. And you know that United States, it's a technology powerhouse. And India is an emerging technology powerhouse. So this collaboration and cooperation is natural between the two. Third area I will touch is energy, clean energy, renewables, green hydrogen, battery technology, etc., etc. In each of these, I can elaborate. Again, this is focused towards the development of the people and it helps both the countries. You are aware of first solar investment in Tamil Nadu. That's going to be a huge investment coming in. And fourth area is education and knowledge partnership. You are aware we have more than 200,000 Indian students. 2/3 of them are in STEM areas. They bring value and competitive edge to the US economy. Just like the number of Indian Americans who are professionals spread all over. So in this, skilling is an important area. That's one of the key subjects which we will be touching upon. And when we talk of education and knowledge partnership today, we just don't simply mean Indian students here. We are looking at campus-to-campus relations under our new education policy. We are also looking at intertwining of degrees, joint research work, etc., etc. So broadly, these are areas where we can be working together. And finally, defense and strategic. Again, you know, as a powerhouse of the world, the United States had the topmost technology. And today, we are looking at not just simply trade, but we are looking at co-development of production together. I'm sure in subsequent questions, I will get to touch upon that.
Issue of defense co-production. A lot has been written about this. We have been getting reports that the GE deal for manufacturing jet engines in collaboration with HAL is done. It has received approval at the highest political level from both sides. Could you give us a sense of how significant this would be for India, and what are some of the differences in the contours of this agreement if you compare to some other relationships that the US has with its allies?
Look, I'm not going to get into specific deals at this moment, but what is important is the difference if you look at 10 years back and today. India is being seen as an important part of the global value chain. In fact, the US NSA was in India, and you have seen his statements. So I don't need to repeat many of those. But what is important is that United States and India today are working much, much closer. It is no longer like it used to be earlier. So we have had capacity building exercises. We have had joint exercises. There has been acquisition. In fact, it has risen many, many times, and I'm consciously avoiding the figures there. But these have been key facets of our defense partnership in the past. What are we looking at now? We are looking at what I will say is a much beyond a buyer-seller relationship. Actually, we are being integrated into the global defense supply chain, and the leverage of India's comparative advantages and that opportunity in defense industrial collaboration, especially here in innovation, co-development, and co-production. You have seen two US Navy ships have undergone repairs in India. Did that ever happen 10 years ago? In fact, when Secretary Austin was in India, a roadmap had been concluded for defense industrial collaboration. And we also have dialogues in defense AI and defense space. So this partnership and defense, of course, is an important ingredient. When I mentioned to you technology, obviously it touches in defense too. When the United States is a powerhouse in technology, we know that in the defense sphere, the defense technology is of top class. And once I mentioned that India is an emerging powerhouse in technology, obviously defense will be one of the areas which will be touched upon.
Right. On critical and emerging technology, this is the reason, ISET was the reason that the US NSA was in India to hold talks with NSA Ajit Doval as well. What exactly are we looking at in terms of deliverables on critical and emerging technology? Ambassador Sandhu, what about on semiconductors?
So, again, coming back to what I mentioned to you, that in technology, it is going to be a collaboration for the future. And technology, as you know, has both the strategic and the commercial side. And an important part of any technology collaboration is the trust and confidence in each other. And that was very clearly reflected when our NSA was here and now NSA Sullivan was in India. Now, coming specifically to ISET, you can see that the ISET, which was held in January in Washington, D.C., actually saw for the first time government, industry, academia coming together. And that's the beauty of ISET. In fact, ISET was announced last year by Prime Minister and President Biden in Tokyo. And NSA this year formally launched it at the White House. And you can see the movement has been so swift. You just had the NSA Sullivan in Delhi for the follow-up, and also shows the importance, both the leaderships attached to ISET. Now, what are the areas which will get covered in this? This is new and emerging technologies. So scientific R&D, quantum, AI, defense innovation, space, telecommunications, that includes 5G, 6G, semiconductors. So all these, my friend, will be touched upon during this visit. There's very much going to be on focus. I am going to avoid telling you specifics, but let me assure you that there already have been policy initiatives on both sides. For example, the CHIPS Act in the United States and semiconductor mission in India. And you are already aware that the semiconductor mission in India tied up with a number of academic institutions. So this is a win-win proposition, and it's a proposition for the future. And finally, I will again come back to the most important aspect, that tech handshake between the two countries is very much powered by trust and confidence in each other.
That's an important point, Ambassador Sandhu. You've really given us a whole scope of collaboration on critical, emerging and new technologies. On the issue of semiconductors, without going into deliverables, could you give us a sense of how we're progressing, making progress on the MOU that was signed between Gina Raimondo and Piyush Goyal in India?
See, there are many elements of semiconductors. And as I mentioned to you, that semiconductors will be an important deliverable during this visit. But having said that, fabs, having the ecosystem around the fabs, that's one aspect. But there's also an equally important aspect of research. And that is, again, one area in which United States and India are going to collaborate very strongly, are already collaborating. And this will happen much more. And finally, the third part, which many of the people miss, in semiconductors, you require a huge trained manpower. And here, India is uniquely placed. 50% of our population is very, very young. And when Prime Minister says it is for global good, what we essentially mean is that even in the semiconductor area, the kind of training, the kind of focus and investments which semiconductor industry here is looking at in India, skilling and trained manpower will be the third and a very important element of that.
Right. My final question, Ambassador Sandhu, when it comes to trade and market access, when it comes to visa issues, any key messages that India would like to send out to the US during this visit?
You will see a touch on all of them. But what I want to mention to you about trade is that it is indeed interesting if you just look at the facts and figures right now. Despite not having an FTA, despite the COVID and all the other challenges, international challenges, the trade between United States and India has touched 190 billion. And that is something which is amazing, that even without FTA and all these challenges, it has reached here. And you can imagine this is going to increase and further deepen.
Mr. Finer, many thanks for those opening remarks and for giving us a very comprehensive view of what the priorities are in the areas of partnership between both India and the US. You said that the relationship is much more deeper and more expansive today. Previously, you've called the US-India relationship amongst the most consequential and one that retains the greatest potential to evolve, strengthen and improve. As you look ahead, where do you believe most progress has been made? Where is most convergence been achieved? And where do you believe more work needs to be done?
So what I think is extraordinary about the U.S.-India relationship, and it's captured in the comment that you quoted from, is that it is both so important currently to each of our interests and our work around the world, but also where we have so much potential to go even further together. And I think both countries have recognized that. But if you look back and review what we have been able to achieve just in the last couple of years, and I'll just point to a few examples that I think really illustrate this, things that we never had the opportunity or had the will to do in the past together. The Quad vaccine partnership during the worst phases of the COVID pandemic and the unique capabilities that India brought to bear toward that effort is one example that I think we will look to for quite some time and that is going to continue to pay dividends for the world. It is really, I think, in many ways, the fact that we have been able to expand the agenda of the U.S.-India bilateral relationship to these global issues. We obviously have a range of bilateral issues like any two countries do to work together, but that as we each develop our capacities to kind of take on these global challenges, the fact that we are able to get on the same page and work on them together, the pandemic being a key example, the deepening sort of strategic alignment, especially in security in the Indo-Pacific region, these are areas of the relationship that we are still developing, that we are still improving, that we are still enhancing, and that were just frankly not front and center on the agenda a decade ago, and very excited to see where these go over the course of the next decade.
You know, speaking about the future and areas of potential partnership as well as excitement in your words, you talked about the defense partnership, you talked about ISAT as well. How significant is it going to be for India and the US to work together on emerging and critical technologies? And I'll ask you this in the context of the fact that, you know, we've had the defense partner status since 2016. Do you believe that this is an inflection point in the defense as well as the critical technology relationship that the two countries enjoy?
Yes, look, I think if we had to pick two core areas where both the most progress has been made in recent years and where we believe there is still so much more progress yet to come, it would be in the areas of our defense partnership and our partnership on critical and emerging technologies. Since you asked about technology and about ISAT, I mean, I should say this was an obvious area of partnership for two countries that have such a kind of deep and abiding commitment to cutting-edge scientific research, to innovation, and to technology, and that are fundamentally free and open societies, and so share a set of values that are being applied, again, to this emerging technology ecosystem that I spoke about. And ISAT is going to be the guiding force to set an agenda for that work, to organize it, to coordinate it, and to bring to bear not just all the tools that exist in each of our governments, which are formidable and important, but all the tools that exist in our societies well beyond governments, whether you're talking about universities or other research institutions. It is a not very well kept secret that probably the greatest strategic assets of both the United States and India are our people. And so there is very little, I think, that we cannot achieve together in this area if we direct our forces together.
Mm-hmm. Let me talk a little bit about the geopolitical reframing that's currently underway, and of course, you know, whether it's China independent of Russia or China and Russia together, and that of course is something that the US and India are looking at this point in time. We've had the 2+2 ministerials, we've got several working groups that are working on a whole host of strategic issues at this point in time. Where do you believe we need to prioritize? What should the focus be in the context of this reframing that's taking place?
So I think this is an area where it's really important to look at how far the United States and India have come in this regard. People who have worked on the US-India relationship, not just for a few years, but for decades, I think would have been hard-pressed to predict that we would have been sitting at a table like this or preparing for a visit like the one that will take place just across the park very soon, where a significant focus would be on the strategic alignment in geopolitics of the United States and India. That was not particularly foreseeable a generation or two earlier, and yet here we are with a much deepening, significantly deepening strategic convergence. And by the way, not just a strategic convergence in the Indo-Pacific region, but on global issues as well. This does not mean the United States and India are going to agree on absolutely everything. It is clear that there are aspects of the current geopolitical environment where we differ and where we are able to have direct and clear conversations on topics, including topics like the Russia-Ukraine war, where there are areas of disagreement, but also areas of very clear alignment. And here I would point to India's repeated commitment, and I expect you will see it again next week, that the rules-based international order has to be defended. Including concepts like sovereignty and the territorial integrity of nations, and that violations of law are just fundamentally not acceptable. So we have developed the kind of mature relationship where we can move forward together in areas where we completely see eye to eye, where we can discuss in a candid and direct way without it emerging into some sort of crisis, areas where we do not 100% agree, like no two nations do. Frankly, I think that, if anything, is the area in which the United States-India relationship has evolved the most and the most positively over time.
Well, that's good to hear. You were talking about rules-based relations and groupings, and I want to ask you about the Quad as well as the IPF and the role and significance of India within these groupings and within the framework.
Just taking a step back, this is an administration, President Biden's administration, that has, from the very minute we got here, said that our approach to the world and our approach to foreign policy is going to begin with our alliances and our partnerships with key countries around the world. We think, and I don't mean this as a political statement in any way, that we have a fundamentally different view of that than did our predecessors, where we see our alliances, our partnerships, we see international institutions, we see international agreements not as a burden on the United States, but as something fundamentally different, something that enables us to advance our interests in ways that we otherwise could not. And it is in that frame, with that frame of mind, that we come to the U.S.-India relationship, and where we see India as such a consequential and important partner for the United States. That means finding ways to deepen that cooperation and finding ways to expand on it, finding new formats through which to pursue it. The Quad existed before this administration. It was not something that we invented, but we elevated it to the head of state level, which has given it new lift and new life and, frankly, new capacity inside each of our systems to really achieve and deliver and be consequential for our people and globally. IPEF is another example of a new format that we have pioneered in this administration to try to advance economic prosperity across the Indo-Pacific region and deepen our ties economically between the United States and the countries of the Indo-Pacific. And India is at the very core of both.
Let me end then by asking you about what everyone here is talking about, and that is the upcoming visit. Prime Minister Modi is going to be here meeting with President Biden. What's the expectation? What's the hope? What do you believe could be the best outcome of this visit?
There were going to be hundreds and hundreds of outcomes of this visit, which you will see in press releases and fact sheets and speeches. But honestly, I think as important as any of that, and I think the main message that we are looking to convey is that this is a relationship of strategic consequence and positive strategic consequence for the world. Again, we are not trying to paper over the fact that we have differences. We think we are much more deeply aligned and significantly converging with each other on innumerable global issues and on innumerable ways that we can benefit each of our populations. And I think what you will see when Prime Minister Modi comes and is able to spend some time with President Biden in this setting, a modern relationship between two significant countries that will benefit their own people and broadly will be beneficial to the world.
Jonathan Pineth, many thanks for your comments today and for giving us a sense of what the future looks like as far as the India-US partnership and relationship is concerned. Appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, big round of applause.